From gleaming shells to invisible code, it powers empires, fuels innovation, and sparks our deepest desires and darkest impulses. It's an idea, a promise, a tool, a fiction we all agree to believe in. This is the story of money, 5,000 years of wealth, trade, and the fragile human construct that underpins it all. Trust. Before the jingle of coins, before the crisp rustle of paper, before the silent hum of digital transactions, how did we get what we needed? For millennia, our ancestors relied on a simple system: barter. I'll give you 3 of my skillfully knapped flints for that hide you cured. It worked for a time in small, tight-knit communities where needs were immediate and relationships direct. What made a good token? It needed to be durable, portable, divisible, and crucially scarce enough to be desirable. For thousands of years, across Africa, Asia, and Oceania, cowrie shells from the Indian Ocean served this purpose. Their intricate beauty and resilience made them a widely accepted form of currency. Elsewhere, it was salt, so vital for preserving food and life itself, that Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in it. Their salarium argentum, or salt money, gives us our modern word salary. Barley, a staple crop, also became a unit of account and exchange in early agricultural societies. But how do you keep track of who owes what, especially when dealing in perishable goods like barley? In Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE, the Sumerians developed a revolutionary system. They used clay tablets, impressing tokens or drawing pictograms to represent goods and quantities, a proto-accounting system. These weren't just records, they were transferable debts, a sophisticated form of credit. Ancient Egypt, nourished by the Nile, built its economy on grain. Huge state-controlled granaries acted almost like banks. People deposited their harvests and received receipts, which could then be used to trade for other goods. The shat, a unit of value equivalent to a certain weight of gold or silver, was used for accounting, though actual metal wasn't always exchanged. The discovery of metallurgy changed everything. Gold and silver, rare, beautiful, and easily divisible, possessed an intrinsic allure. Unlike barley, they didn't rot. Unlike salt, they didn't dissolve. They could be melted down and reformed. Around 600 BCE, in the Kingdom of Lydia, now part of modern-day Turkey, a pivotal innovation occurred. The Lydians began producing the world's first standardized coins from electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. These weren't just weighed lumps, they were stamped with an official mark, usually an animal like a lion, guaranteeing their weight and purity. King Croesus, whose name became synonymous with immense wealth, further developed this, issuing separate gold and silver coins. This was revolutionary. Suddenly, trade became faster, more efficient. You no longer needed scales for every transaction. The state stamp was a guarantee, a form of trust backed by royal authority. The Lydian invention spread like wildfire. The ancient Greeks, with their sprawling network of city-states and colonies, embraced coinage. The Athenian silver drachma, often bearing the image of an owl, became a dominant currency in the Mediterranean, facilitating trade and funding their powerful navy. But it was Rome that truly understood the power of money as an imperial tool. As the Republic and later the Empire expanded, so did its currency, the silver denarius and the gold aureus. These coins weren't just economic instruments, they were potent propaganda. Each coin bore the image of the emperor, a constant reminder, even in the most remote provinces, of Roman power and authority. It was a daily affirmation of imperial reach, a tiny billboard in every citizen's pocket. Standardized currency was the lifeblood of the empire. It paid the legions that conquered and defended vast territories. It funded the construction of roads, aqueducts, and public buildings that unified disparate peoples. Taxation, collected in Roman coin, flowed back to the heart of the empire, enabling its administration and further expansion. With a single trusted currency, trade flourished from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. The Roman state guaranteed the coin's value, creating a vast economic zone built on this shared trust. This monetary unification was a cornerstone of the Pax Romana. However, this trust could be eroded. As emperors faced mounting expenses, particularly for military campaigns, they sometimes resorted to debasing the currency, reducing the silver content of the denarius while maintaining its face value. This was an early form of inflation. People eventually noticed, confidence waned, and prices soared. The eventual decline and fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century CE led to economic fragmentation. The unifying power of its currency dissolved, replaced by a patchwork of local bartering systems and currencies issued by new Germanic kingdoms. The grand experiment of imperial money, for a time, seemed lost. While Europe grappled with the aftermath of Rome's fall, a monetary revolution was brewing in the East. During the Tang dynasty in China, beginning in the 7th century, merchants faced a practical problem. Copper coins were heavy and cumbersome for large transactions. Their solution? Paper. Merchants began issuing private bills of exchange or promissory notes known as jiaozi, literally flying money because it was so much lighter than coin. By the 11th century, under the Song dynasty, the government took over, producing the world's first state-issued paper currency. As banking evolved, so did the question of what truly backed money. For centuries, it was the intrinsic value of precious metals. Great Britain, under the influence of figures like Sir Isaac Newton, master of the mint, began to formalize this connection, effectively moving towards a gold standard by the early 18th century. This meant the value of its currency was directly linked to a fixed quantity of gold. The thirst for gold and silver fueled an age of unprecedented global expansion and exploitation. Starting in the late 15th century, European powers, particularly Spain and Portugal, ventured into the Americas. The vast silver mines of Potosi in modern-day Bolivia and the gold plundered from the Aztec and Inca empires flooded Europe with precious metals. This influx dramatically reshaped European economies, causing inflation but also funding further colonial ventures. This era also saw the horrific rise of the transatlantic slave trade. The triangular commerce between Europe, Africa, and the Americas was financed by the burgeoning banking system. European goods were traded for enslaved Africans, who were then forcibly transported to the Americas to labor on plantations producing sugar, cotton, and tobacco, commodities that generated immense wealth for colonial powers. Money, in this context, became deeply enmeshed with human suffering and brutal exploitation. The Industrial Revolution, beginning in the late 18th century, further transformed the financial landscape. Factories needed massive investment. New financial instruments like stocks and bonds became common, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital and investors to share in the profits and risks of new enterprises. Banking became a global force. Dynasties like the Rothschilds wielded immense influence, financing governments and industries across continents. The pursuit of raw materials and new markets drove further colonial expansion, with money as both the means and the motive. By the late 19th century, many of the world's major economies had adopted the international gold standard. This system was intended to provide stability and predictability in international trade, as currencies were pegged to gold at fixed rates. It represented an era of unprecedented global economic integration, but it also imposed rigid constraints on domestic monetary policy. The history of money is not just a story of innovation and expansion, but also of human folly and the fragility of trust. Long before the 20th century, speculative bubbles showed how quickly confidence could turn into mania, and mania into ruin. In 17th century Holland, tulip mania saw the price of tulip bulbs skyrocket to absurd levels before crashing spectacularly. In 1720, Britain was gripped by the South Sea bubble. where shares in the South Sea Company, fueled by promises of immense wealth from trade with South America, soared and then collapsed, bankrupting thousands. The most infamous crash of the pre-digital age was the Wall Street crash of 1929. After a decade of unprecedented optimism, the Roaring Twenties, the stock market plummeted, triggering the Great Depression, a global economic catastrophe that highlighted the interconnectedness of the world's financial system and the devastating consequences when trust evaporates. The gold standard, strained by World War I, collapsed during the Depression. After World War II, with much of the world in ruins, leaders sought to create a more stable international monetary system. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the Allies forged a new order. The Bretton Woods system pegged the US dollar to gold at $35 an ounce, and other major currencies were pegged to the dollar. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank were created to oversee this system and provide financial assistance. For a while, it brought stability and facilitated post-war recovery. But the system came under pressure as U.S. spending on the Vietnam War and domestic programs increased, and its gold reserves dwindled. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon unilaterally terminated the convertibility of the U.S. dollar to gold. This Nixon shock effectively ended the Bretton Woods system. The world transitioned to an era of fiat money currency, backed not by a physical commodity, but by government decree and public trust and floating exchange rates. The move to fiat money coincided with another revolution, the digitization of finance. As early as the 1950s, the first credit cards, like the Diners Club card, emerged, allowing consumers to buy now and pay later, a new form of easily accessible personal debt. The 1960s and 70s saw the advent of automated teller machines, or ATMs, and the development of electronic funds transfer systems like SWIFT, which allowed banks to communicate and transfer vast sums globally almost instantaneously. Money was becoming increasingly invisible, a stream of electrons. The invisible nature of modern finance and its concentration in the hands of large institutions faced a severe test in 2008. The global financial crisis, triggered by the collapse of the U.S. housing market and risky derivatives, saw major banks fail and required massive government bailouts. Trust in the traditional financial system was profoundly shaken. It was in this atmosphere of distrust that an anonymous person or group, under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, released a white paper in late 2008. It proposed Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Bitcoin introduced blockchain technology, a decentralized, distributed ledger maintained by a network of computers, making transactions transparent and seemingly immutable without needing a central authority like a bank. From barter to blockchain, the 5,000-year journey of money has been a relentless quest for a more perfect way to represent and exchange value. But at its core, money remains what it has always been, a social contract. It works because we collectively believe it works. Its value is not in the metal, the paper, or the code, but in our shared trust. This trust has built civilizations, enabled breathtaking innovation, and connected humanity across vast distances. Yet the story of money is also intertwined with power, control, and inequality. It has been a tool for liberation and a mechanism for oppression. As we stand on the cusp of new monetary paradigms, the fundamental questions remain. Who controls money? Who benefits? And what does it mean for our future? Is money the ultimate expression of human freedom, or a new, more sophisticated form of bondage? As Yuval Noah Harari observed, money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. But like any powerful tool, its ultimate impact depends on the wisdom and the values of those who wield it. The story of money is far from over, It is continually being rewritten by us all. Music swells, title, key sources, and acknowledgements.